All living things need energy to perform important functions. Energy is needed for obvious things, like moving muscles. Seems like Garfield's unwilling to use any of the energy he's stored. It's also used for less obvious things. Energy is used in the process of sending messages from your brain to other parts of your body, releasing chemicals in your brain, and building new nucleic acids when your cells are dividing. No wonder you need a good breakfast in order to learn at school. Cells can't directly use energy from food because it would release too much energy all at once. So through a series of chemical reactions, a molecule called ATP is formed using the energy found in food. This is what life uses for energy. There are two different ways an organism might get food in order to make this energy. They might make the food themselves, or they might eat to get their food. Organisms that make food themselves are called autotrophs. A synonym for autotrophs is producers. This is because they produce their own food. And by producing their own food, I don't mean that they go to the fridge and make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean that inside of their body, they actually make the food. Plants and algae are examples of autotrophs. They use the process of photosynthesis to harness energy from the sun and make their own food out of carbon dioxide and water. In mitochondria in their cells, they then break down this food in order to extract energy from it. In contrast, heterotrophs, or consumers as they're sometimes called, must consume food for energy. In other words, they must eat something. There are a variety of different types of consumers based on what exactly they eat for energy. Herbivores eat plants, carnivores eat animals, omnivores eat both plants and animals. Scavengers eat scraps, and decomposers eat decaying plants and animals. But what they all share in common is that they break down compounds obtained from other organisms in order to obtain their energy. In this chapter, we'll be focusing on autotrophs and how they make their own food. Without the process of photosynthesis, life as we know it would not exist. Almost all food chains trace their way back to plants, which get their energy from the sun. I say almost because there are some bacteria that live deep in the ocean where the sun doesn't shine that can get their energy from chemical compounds. Photosynthesis mainly takes place in the leaves of plants. In biology, structure always fits function. Most plants have wide but thin leaves so that the most surface can be exposed to the sun. However, water is lost through leaves, so plants that live in dry places have to balance their need for food with their need for water. Desert plants have a wide variety of adaptations that allow them to live in such dry places. The desert can be good for photosynthesis since there's a lot of light, but plants can become dehydrated with wide, thin leaves like those you might find on a plant around here, like oak trees. So some desert plants have a thick, waxy coating that prevents water loss, and others have very small pointed leaves called needles to minimize their water loss. Pine needles are also adapted to dry conditions. During the winter when the ground freezes, not much water is able to get through to the roots, so pine needles have compact structure and waxy covering to prevent water loss. Both plants and animals use a molecule called ATP for energy in their cells. The food that plants make during photosynthesis is then broken down to give energy to ATP. Remember that energy is stored in chemical bonds, and when chemical bonds are broken, that energy is released. This is how ATP works. ATP is made of 3 parts: a nitrogen base called adenine, a 5-carbon sugar called ribose, and 3 phosphate groups. ATP is actually a nucleotide because it contains the 3 parts that every nucleotide has: sugar, phosphate, nitrogen base. We learned in Chapter 2 that polymers of nucleotides, or nucleic acids, store genetic information. However, ATP doesn't form polymers, and it's used for energy. The key to ATP's energy use lies in the phosphate groups. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate because it contains 3 phosphate groups. When the cell needs energy to do some kind of cellular work, like pull muscle fibers past each other during movement, or changing the shape of protein channels during active transport to allow substances to move from low concentration to high concentration, the bond between the phosphate groups is broken. The energy released from breaking this bond can be used to do cellular work. When the bond is broken, the phosphate group is able to just float away. and the resulting molecule is called ADP, or adenosine diphosphate. The prefix di means two. Energy from food, whether that food was eaten or made by the organism, can then be used to reattach the phosphate, so the energy found in the food can be transferred to the ATP molecule and stored in the bonds between phosphate molecules again. Here's a picture of ATP and ADP. Can you pick out which is which? Which one is storing energy? Which one has released energy?